Almost any effect, the actions of titles and graphics in the program can be animated. This isn't difficult to do with the aid of so-called animation keys or keyframe. You probably noticed at the bottom of the pan crop settings there is a small time bar. This is a personal mini timeline of the current event for the current effect with its own playhead. Its length, naturally, corresponds to the length of the event. The Effects and Generators settings also has its own mini timeline, but by default it is not enabled. In order to enable it, the icon of a clock with a plus sign in the Effects and Generators setting window must be pressed for animating a specific point of the settings. Clicking it will open the mini timeline. Just as in the settings of some of the effects, there is an Animate button at the bottom of the window for animating all existing settings. Let's open the event Pan Crop again. All the settings in the window are registered in the keyframes by default. Here, it is in the shape of a small diamond and is located at the very beginning of the mini timeline. For an animation, we need a minimum of 2 keyframes. We'll change the settings as we see fit. The animation keyframes are created by default where the playhead is located when the settings are changed. As you can see, the playhead is located directly on the first key, which means that our manipulation was temporarily registered in it. Now, let's drag the playhead forward in time. Let's change our settings. To name just a few, we'll reduce, rotate, and drag the image to the side. As you can see, another keyframe has automatically appeared on the timeline at the position of the playhead. Precisely these settings which we just made have been registered in the second key. Now, let's drag the playhead from the second key to the first. We see an animation through the key, but in the opposite direction, meaning that the playhead is moving to the left. By placing the playhead on the first keyframe, we'll see that it has saved its settings. Animation by keyframes. This change of the settings is in regard to the time frame from one key to the next. Under the timeline to the left, there is a set of buttons for working with the keyframes. Press the image key with a plus sign to add a keyframe in the location of the playhead. The shortcut key on the keyboard, Insert. Moreover, this keyframe saves the settings of the previous key. The key button with a minus sign deletes the selected key, the Delete button on the keyboard. The key buttons with arrows allow you to move between the keys, a keyboard shortcut of Control Left and Control Right. The key buttons with arrows and lines are for changing over to the first and last key on the mini timeline. Keyboard shortcuts of Control Home and Control End. And finally, the button with a picture of a lock with a cursor. When it is pressed, it turns on the synchronization status of the playhead of the current window with the main playhead in order for the result to be displayed in the Project View window. This toolkit is available under each mini timeline. As we know, several effects can be applied to one video event, but it has only one mini timeline. So, in order to avoid confusion, each time you turn on the animation on the mini timeline, individual layers appear for configuring each effect. First, we'll decide how we want to animate it to create a bulge from the center. And with rotation, we'll open the settings for Pan Crop. Since we've already configured it, its settings are automatically registered in the first key. Now, we'll move the playhead to the spot of the intended end of the animation and click on the button with the image of a keyframe with a plus sign in order to add a keyframe with the same settings. We must save the existing settings as at the end of the animation, the title must have a natural look. We'll return the playhead to the beginning, to the first key, using a keyboard shortcut of Control Home, and we'll configure the start of the effect. We'll rotate the image 360 degrees, and we'll reduce its size to a minimum, increasing the size of the working frame to its maximum. The Size About Center button on the Settings panel can be pushed in order to change the relative size of the center, but not the edges of the image. We'll close the window. Let's play it back and check how our title turned out. Now, to make it more interesting, let's add an effect of motion blur. We'll open the list of effects. Select an effect called Linear Blur. In the window that opens, we'll go to the settings for Pan Crop and turn on the Vital Synchronizer for the playheads. Now, let's move over to the last keyframe, there, to where the animation ends. We press the Last Frame button or by pressing the keyboard combination of Control-End. We'll return to the blur settings. We turn on animation and synchronize the playheads. We add a keyframe. We move over to the first keyframe and we add blur. We see that a keyframe appears. And we check our animation.